Hi, welcome back to the shop. Thanks for stopping by. This week's project, I got the idea from a friend of mine in the UK, Mark Beckett. He has a YouTube channel. He's Mark the Gentleman Woodturner. And I'm going to drop a link in the description to the video that I watched of his. He also did a live on it prior to doing the video. But he made some Easter eggs and colored them on his lathe. And I thought that I would make some Easter eggs using some burl and resin. So the color will be in the resin. So we're gonna make 4 with burl and resin, and then 1 just with resin. And I'm gonna try something different on my resin. So I'm gonna make 1 out of purple using violet mica powder and violet dye. We're gonna make a yellow one using sunrise yellow powder and yellow dye. We're going to make 1 using ocean blue and paradise blue. And we are going to make the next one using vibrant pink powder, and I'm going to try to get a dye that's pink out of some red transparent and some white opaque. So we'll see how that works out. And then what I'm going to do, I'm mixing extra resin. What I'm going to do after I pour those 4 colors individually is I'm going to let my dye, or let my resin start to get ready to cure. That has a 12-minute work time. I've got a temperature gun here. When it gets to around 95 degrees, when I mix them together, then the colors won't blend together. Not as well anyway. And so I'm going to try to make a multicolored one using the 4 colors of resin I'm going to have left over. I will make more of each than I need. And we're going to try and make a solid resin egg with those 4 colors all swirled through it. So we'll start out. I've taken a shot, my best guess at how much resin I'm going to need. And so I marked that on the outside of this container, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do A side this much, weigh it, measure the same amount of weight B side into the second container, mix them together in a bigger one, and then we'll divide them up into smaller containers and put the colors in individually. And before I get going with that, here are my very fancy molds. I've glued my burl wood in the bottom of them. I got 2 like this, and then I've got 2 together on the same base, and I've double glued inside outside, so I'm hopeful that they're going to stay together. We will find out together shortly. And this is stabilized in cactus, dried to 0%, stabilized in cactus juice resin in the vacuum chamber, and then cured. And so they'll be nice stable pieces. All right, so we're going to start off here by mixing up a little bit of resin. So I got these new scales, and they weigh in 1/10 of a gram increments, and the ones I used before this were 1 gram increments, and previous to that they were 2 gram. So I kept going over a little bit, and so I want to be precise on this, and so you see I keep bouncing back and forth, and I finally did get them settled out, but that's why I sped over that part. Going to clean off the sides and the bottom to make sure that I got all the side A and side B together off the sides, so it's not anything stuck on there that'll prevent it from curing properly. Now I have the burls glued with hot melt glue in the bottom of those molds, and because they're just hot melt glued together, I'm going to be able to split those apart, so I didn't put any mold release in them. On the one that I'm going to do, which is with the solid resin piece on its own after the fact, that one does have mold release in it, so I've already put the mold release in that. Alright, that is close enough to do what we want to do. Yeah, I'm going to mix these, and I'm going to add the white to the red afterwards. I'm going to say that's pink. I'm not going to put any white in that. Who's watching for me to put the wrong powder in the wrong color here? This is Illuminate Clear Slow resin too, by the way. All right, so I'm going to pour all these really quick and get them in one pressure pot. Okay, I'm going to put these ones under pressure, and then I'm going to use a second pressure pot for the other ones. Okay, so this one's up to 99, 96, 97, 93, so it's time to mix them together. So I have no idea if I've left this too long or not. I say I've never done this before, so we're going to find out how it turns out together. All right, so I got these out of the pressure pot, out of the molds now, and they turned out pretty good. I think I'm going to turn the purple one. I probably won't get all 4 turned or 5 turned in this video, but I think I'll turn the purple one, and possibly, if time allows, I may try this multicolored resin one, which kind of turned out cool. And so it does not blend together at that temperature. So here's a little tip that if you're going to pour much resin, you're going to make a mess like I do, maybe not as bad as I do, but if you get a high density polyethylene cover for your table, this stuff will come right off. Anything that's on it, I found wood glue, resin, once you let it dry, everything just scrapes off this really, really well. So save yourself some work. All right, so we'll get one of these on the lathe and see how we make it. So I didn't show you what the bottom of the purple one looked like before I glued it up, but it looked like this when I started, and I sanded the resin off the bottom nice and square so that I could take this piece of sacrificial block and attach it with thick Starbond glue. Now, what I didn't notice is how straight grained, or I didn't pay attention to how straight grained that piece of wood was, and that's going to be a problem coming up. The other thing I wasn't sure of was how well Starbond would adhere to cactus juice stabilized resin, because hot melt glue doesn't stick to it. I've proven that in other videos. Turned out that the Starbond worked fantastic, but again, keep an eye on this straight grain block that I use, and let this be a lesson, I guess. So this is where the grain in the piece of wood that I used for a tenon let go. It didn't give any indication there was a problem. As you can see, this is running at 1/10 speed, and there wasn't a waver until it let go. So stabilized burl and Illuminate resin are both very hard, so there was no damage to the outside, and I've got lots of meat left anyway. So I took this off, sanded the bottom flat on my disc sander, made a very accurate mark of center. You can see it's running nice and true in the between centers. I just cut a new tenon on it. Now this is the same piece of wood that I had glued onto it before. Got it back in the chuck. It is a little tiny bit out of balance there. And making nice easy cuts again. And they come apart for the second time. Okay, so the grain in that cherry that I used for a tenon was not good enough to use for a tenon. So I got a piece of laminated yellow birch end grain on here now, and we're going to try again. I left it long so that hopefully I can part it off and mount 2 or 3 of these on it before I need another one. And you can see that I got it a little bit out of whack, and that's because I had to sand off what was left on the bottom, and I didn't get it sanded perfectly square. So, but I've got lots of meat here because I'm not down to the final thickness of this anyhow. So hopefully this will all work out to the right size when we're done. Now that I got the top flat again, I'm just going to put the tailstock up without a center in it now, because I don't want to get a point down there too far. That's just a little extra insurance while I get this screwed back up again. All right, I'm going to sand this up off camera and I'll bring you back. And what I'm going to do, I want to try to turn the bottom so that it's round without having to sand it round. I know lots of guys sand them round and they do a good job with them. I'm not as good sanding them round as I would be turning them round, I don't believe. So I'm going to try that and see how it works out. And I'll show you the jig that I'm going to gear up here shortly. All right, so I'm all sanded up now to 600 grit. I'm going to put some Yorkshire grit, regular and microfine. And then I'll continue sanding up to 2500, from 1500 up to 2500 after that. All right, that's the regular Yorkshire grit. And that's about the equivalent of 1,000 grit sanding paper without the dust. And now I'm going to use microfine. Okay, I'm going to go through the rest of the grits of sandpaper up to 2500, and then I'm going to part this off and I'll show you the contraption I'm going to try and gear up to turn that bottom round. So I mounted this faceplate to the lathe. It has a piece of laminated walnut on it, and all I did was drilled a hole that was just slightly smaller than the diameter of the egg. And now I'm just tapering the bottom of the hole so that the top of the egg will fit down in it without hitting. So I've left the center hole on this from where I parted it off, and that's the reason that I parted it all the way off, so I'd have this little mark in the center. And I'm going to align that hole with the brad point on my tailstock, my live center, and that's just for alignment. Now I'm not pushing this in so that it won't mark the finished piece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it with a pencil. Then I'll wrap the egg with a piece of tape so that it doesn't mark the finish when I do push it in there. Then I'm going to put it in with hot milk glue, and I'll put a bead of hot melt all the way around it because it's the first time I've done this, and although I'm sure that it's going to be in there very securely, I don't want to take any chances. Alright, so I'm not going to show you all the sanding, but I'll get this sanded up to the same as the other half of the egg, and I'll bring you back when I'm taking it out of the jig. Okay, so I'm going to part some of this glue off with a chisel before I take it off with alcohol. Okay, that's as close as I dare to go. Isopropyl alcohol will dissolve hot melt glue very nicely and very cleanly. So I buffed this with AAA. Now I'm just on to step 2, which is white diamond. And you got to be really careful when you buff these little small round pieces because there's not a lot to hang on to and they get slippery. So you got to make sure you get a real good grip on them, or they will go bouncing across your shop floor. So a couple takeaways from this one. Starbond thick, adheres well to cactus juice stabilized burl. And the second one, I guess, would be to keep an eye on the kind of material that you use if you're gluing a tenon onto a piece. And watch the grain. Don't use cross grain. So if you're still with me, thanks so much for hanging around. I really appreciate it. If you like this video and you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. Hit the thumbs up and the thumbs down, whichever way you feel. If you do hit the thumbs down, please let me know why, so I can improve. And feel free to leave a comment. I always respond to them all. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.